All right. Give a little bit of history for you. You were raised, your parents were very much thin focused, right? Your dad was very much
definitely
wanted to make sure that you were healthy and thin and encouraged you always to diet and whatnot. Anyway, so how old are you?
I'm 48.
You're 48, and do you know your weight?
I think it's maybe like 210.
Okay. What's the heaviest you've ever been?
Maybe how I am now, 210.
Okay. So you started watching my YouTubes how long ago?
About a year and 3 months ago. Okay. And that's when I wasn't even really I didn't even realize I was suffering so much mentally until I started watching the videos and your suggestions to people how they should really maybe just like go into being fat and give that a try and see if they can adjust and adapt to that sort of feeling. But then I didn't realize how much freedom would come with not having to suffer. How much mental freedom was. I didn't realize how much I was suffering, how deep the magnitude of the suffering was for me until I kind of mentally did some of those processes that you were talking about with your other clients.
Mm-hmm. Well, and even then, when you and I first started talking a couple weeks ago, you still held on to the hope that you would be thinner.
Yes.
So.
And I even, like, in the back of my mind, before you told me just forget about HCG, that pretend like there's no such thing, I even held on to clothes that would be impossible to get into without it. Mm-hmm. Like clothes that I would have to lose 30 pounds to get into. And so after getting rid of that, then it was solidified that there's nothing to be done. There's no clothes I need to try to get into. There's nothing to be done about my body. It's fine the way it is. That act really solidified it. And then it was able to process a lot of the other stuff we talked about.
Do you agree that it really forced you to look at the permanence of it? That you'll be this size, the biggest size you've ever been permanently? Something you never, ever would have thought you could accept. When you really opened your mind and your whole entire sense of life around this isn't negotiable. I'm going to stay this size forever. It could go up, it could go down, and I don't ever want to suffer thinking about it ever again or even caring. And so ultimately, if I'm going to recover, it doesn't make sense to even hold on to those clothes. Doesn't make sense.
Right. And that feeling, that sense of freedom that comes with deciding not to suffer anymore is so huge that when you're out of it and look back, you don't realize how harsh you were on yourself or how harsh I was on myself or how much suffering I actually was doing. Some of those things I did, I actually thought were not weird.
Yeah, and the amount of things you wouldn't let yourself do. Like you wouldn't let yourself, you were really wanting to rock climb, wouldn't do that. Wouldn't do this.
I would never, not even in a million years, I'm 210 pounds, not in a million years would I thought that would be okay to climb up a wall and have someone, I haven't started it yet, but I am going to be taking the rock climbing class.
You know how many men who are 200 pounds are rock climbing, right? You know that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Pardon me?
You know how many men who are 200, 250 pounds who rock climb?
Oh, yeah, right, the real tall.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even think of that. I just thought, you're just a silly cow, Meg.
You can't go to the beach. You can't go to the pool.
You can't go on vacation. You can't go to,
you can't go to the wedding. You can't wear those clothes. You can't until you lose weight, because when you lose weight, all of those experiences become so amazing that you don't want to go to the experience. You don't want to go and have a sub-experience. So you're going to hold off on life until you're thin enough. So you never actually do any of those activities. So now you're doing all of these activities. You're the heaviest you've ever been. But yet,
yes, I'm the heaviest I've ever been, and I've been holding off on living life, because I thought that I needed to be thin to experience the things that I want to experience.
And now that you've let go of that and gone into accepting your body and accepting that people think you're unhealthy and people think that you, you're opening yourself up to dating, right? We talked about.
I think I just don't give a shit. I've just given up on myself. Like, I don't.
That's what they think.
They feel like I'm not. Yeah, that I'm not taking care of my. I don't know how maintaining or whatever.
They don't think you're taking care of yourself, but at the same time, you're actually doing more self-love than you probably ever have.
Exactly. I am. And I'm going on a tour that's a bike tour around the city. And before I thought, oh, you're too fat to go on that. You're just going to hold up the whole group because you'll be wheezing and...
Do you hear how abusive that's such an abusive self-talk.
Yeah, I know, but then when I talk to you, like the second time we talked, you're like, you're doing stuff, you're not doing stuff for yourself to make other people feel like, to keep them from judging you somehow.
Yeah, to keep them closed-minded around what someone who's, the ability of someone to live in a body that's not ideal, based on the system that says what's ideal. You're living in a body that's non-ideal and you're happy. And you don't care. And you're not going to limit yourself because of it. You're not going to hide anymore because of it. And you're not going to suffer because of it anymore.
No.
There's a lot of freedom in that.
It's all the freedom. I mean, I even don't really have bad dreams anymore. There's freedom in so many aspects of my life in just a couple of short weeks after talking to you.
What are some of the symptoms?
When I have all this time, pardon me?
Give me the comparison before and after.
For an example of what I used to do before.
Yes.
Yeah, I used to think that it would be fine to restrict food for weeks and weeks until I couldn't do anymore, and then
you also thought it was fine to basically binge too before you were going to restrict. You didn't think that was an issue.
I didn't think there was really anything wrong with that. Mm-hmm. I didn't think that was that weird.
Well, it's not that weird actually. It's very common, right? But ultimately, do you have less nightmares? Overall, your health and well-being do you have any symptoms where before your blood pressure's good? Any symptoms? Like you said, I don't have,
no. And before I'm sure I was inflamed all the time. I mean, I had crazy thoughts all the time, like, oh my God, I have to, make lists and manage food and check my weight or just thinking about, which now I know is very inflammatory, but thinking, okay, next Tuesday, that's my drop dead day to start in on this food restriction, whatever diet I glommed onto at the time, and it would make me so crazy that I didn't even realize that I was just eating in preparation for that, eating way more than I want.
How does that sound to you? Could you go back there?
No, I can't. And so, and then after talking to you and having days to process it over and realize, how abnormal that is to set yourself up for restriction so that means everybody around here has tons of food. I live in the city. There's tons of food in stores and restaurants all around here, but somehow it's not for you, you silly cow. It's all for everybody else, and you can't have any because you're too fat to live. I don't know. I had crazy thoughts like that all the time, and I realize now that was a lot of brain inflammation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so that permanent access to food, we talked about that hierarchy of need.
Mm-hmm.
Freedom to eat.
Yes.
The safety with food, meaning no food is off limits, no food is bad, it's all gray, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's no black and white foods anymore. And that it's always going to be there, that there's abundance of it. incredibly relieving. It really takes away a lot of that inflammation, right?
Yes. And so, yes. And then, but when you're in it, you can't see it for the reality that it is.
No, because you're living for a fantasy. You think you're going to reach a fantasy goal, right? I'm doing it for a purpose. There's a reason I'm doing all this. And you don't see the abusiveness around it. You don't see the inhumane. It's how inhumane it is. At all, because you think that you're going to get this gold, right? This big pot of gold. So you're literally putting everything on hold, your entire life on hold. You're 48. You've been doing this since you were 12.
Yes.
Right? So how long is that?
36 years.
And are you amazed too at how quickly this has just gone?
Yeah, it was definitely overnight.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people think, I've been doing this for so long. This just must take time. I'm like, no, it takes humility.
No, because the freedom that you have, all those restrictions or lists or all those things that now I realize that I just highly resented at the time, but would force myself to do, cause a lot of inflammation as well. But all those things are gone, so there's no ideal weight to be gained. There's no way to manipulate my body into doing something. I don't have to do any of that, and ever again. My body will just do whatever it wants.
Yeah, and you don't expect to lose weight.
No.
Can you see why you would be like? Can you see why I would say don't expect to lose weight? Don't do it. Don't even hope to lose weight. Because if you hold on to the hope or expectation, you're holding on to the suffering. Because you have to keep your eye on your weight. You have to body check.
Because there's no goal here.
Mm-mm. No, your body's not really your business. You need to do what it says. You have the freedom to eat. You have the freedom to do all this stuff, but it's none of your business. The other thing that we were just talking about is how before with a diet, what was the last diet that you were proselytizing about? Like, you should do this. That food is super bad. You need to get rid of it. Like, where you're really strong opinion about the fear of food. What was the last diet?
Sugar. It was some carbohydrate. What was it? It was getting rid of all grains and sugars and white flours and stuff.
All the inflammatory food to help with your inflammation that is maybe directly being caused by this issue around the third hierarchy of need and then the first hierarchy of need being threatened. The fact that you're living in a third world environment in your mind around food, maybe that's the cause. Of course you should get rid of sugar.
Yeah, but also that was another thing I learned after watching your videos. I didn't realize it was just sugar is fine. It's just a highly stimulating. It's not the devil.
Mm-mm.
It's
not black or white. It's gray. It's very gray.
Stimulates your hormones faster. That's all.
That's it.
That's it. I mean, my organs have the ability to process these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you listen. But if you're full of fear and shame around eating it, it's very hard to hear the body at all because you're hearing your shame and your fear, which is inflammatory. So the actual fear and shame about eating sugar is probably more inflammatory than the actual sugar you're eating.
Yeah, and I've heard you say that lots of times to people.
In hindsight, do you see the truth in it? Like, oh yeah, now I eat it, same amount, and I have no reaction. Whereas before it was insane.
I don't. When I first started eating to hunger though, when I first started watching your videos, I did go a little crazy with sugar in the beginning, and it was kind of.
It's understandable when that's something you've been depriving. You're gonna, there's a pendulum swing to that, right?
Yeah, but it wasn't. I didn't feel as though I had to fix it. I was just like, okay, maybe not as much, but I can definitely handle a good amount of sugar now without any problems, without any. But I think I had maybe made myself sensitive from all the restricting.
And they're restricting in fear. You're correct. That restriction, now that's the other part. Like, why aren't they talking about how restricting food makes you highly inflamed and more reactive to when you eat the food? So when something's inflammatory in terms of physiology, it's not just one thing's inflammatory. Something has to be sensitive to inflammation, or the actual communication between the neurons, right? One has to be highly sensitively responsive to the stimulus. So is it the stimulus or the hypersensitive response to the stimulus that's caused from removing the stimulus, right? So the reactivity of this then gets really big. It magnifies its reactivity to it because you've eliminated that food. So is it the food that's inflammatory, or how you respond when how you become more sensitive on the response side to restriction that makes you sensitive? Which one is it?
Yeah, it wasn't the food at all. No. I mean, the food is just whatever it is.
Yeah, the body is not going, isn't angry at you. The body isn't feeling like it's being harmed. It has to respond, So as you psychologically restrict food, whatever type it is, you become more sensitive to it naturally because you're not giving your body the stimulus of it. And then when someone who believes they shouldn't be eating those foods actually eats it, they have shame and fear of what they've done, which inflames the response even more. So not only are they sensitive on the receptor side of the food, but they're also sensitive through the brain and the central nervous system, which makes you highly inflammatory.
Yes, I didn't realize that before, and I would have a lot of negative while I was eating it.
About the food, not your response or psychology, which is the actual problem, right?
Yes.
Demonizing the food is like blaming the food. That's how the diet industry works. They would never take responsibility for that, ever. They would never say, what we're telling you to do is making your body super fucking sensitive to inflammation with everything. Enough that you have to eat so anti-inflammatory and you're still inflamed. That's how inflammatory are what we do.
But it's true. As soon as you start even thinking that you're going to do it, not everybody, but me, as soon as I started thinking that I was going to restrict food is when, this is even before the diet even happened.
No, of course. Some people don't ever get to the dieting, but they totally believe that they will at some point restrict. So they're constantly living in this feasting before famine state of mind, because maybe in a year from now I'll fix it all. So any of the physical problems that occur.
I have felt like that as well too, Robin. I felt like maybe in a year from now, but I just can't do it again right now or something.
Yeah, because my life circumstances are too difficult. I don't have the energy to restrict, because restriction is so freaking inflammatory. It requires you have obsessive compulsiveness to micromanage that primal urge to eat, because that's what you're triggering. And then you're the one that sucks and has no self-control in the end, because the restrictive diet is so righteous. It's so healthy for you. So you must be the piece of shit.
But
you can't handle it, right?
Think that they put thin with healthy. They put that together in the same sentence.
And we've
talked.
Don't
want to be thin and healthy.
And that stems from post-World War II height and weight chart propaganda, the fear-mongering that happened with the insurance companies around, you need to go into the doctor because you could have disease and you should have insurance because just in case. And if your height and weight is too high, you're likely to have high disease, so you should get insurance.
I'm so glad you talked to me about that earlier today.
Well, it's important because that's what it stems from. Anybody that says thin is healthier is stuck in like such an old state of thinking, that's how powerful fear is. Passes down generations, like 3 generations have passed down fear from the height and weight charts. Propaganda from the insurance companies post-World War II. It's messed up. And here we are in 2017, and people are still using the same terrible non-science. It was statistics. It's called statistics that don't discuss environment, stress, this person's belief systems, Doesn't talk about their access to food. It doesn't talk about anything. All it says is height and weight chart. You're thin and healthier by association, which is not true. How many thin people do you know who have all sorts of problems?
All of them, because they're all restricted.
I have a bulging disc, a herniated disc. I have inflammation from that, chronic pain, sensitivity to pressure change in the earth. What else do I have? Right? Supposedly, because I'm thin, I should have absolutely no pain. I should never fart. I shouldn't have any GI issues. Never be sick.
Robin, and the perfect, perfect family and dog and house and cars
and husband and life and like everything's perfect for me.
Yeah. That's how it should be for you.
Yeah, exactly.
You should never have back pain.
Right? Because only fat people have back pain.
Yeah. But I did used to think that way, and
it's incredibly ignorant when you think about it, right? When you think about that way of thinking, so incredibly ignorant, because you are living you are doing everything you were told to be healthy, and ultimately, how did the results end for you?
Very unhealthily.
Psychologically, neurologically, hormonally, the whole system, it was opposite of what you would have thought. And how is it that there's such a high rate of this statistically? If we look at the actual evidence shown on results, 95+% of all people dieting to lose weight end up with these issues, and they end up getting fatter. So that is evidence of causation. So in terms of thin equals healthy, that's association, and that's not true in any way. In relative to the statistics of weight gain from dieting, it is absolutely statistically significant and arguably a causation.
Yes.
But yet we're going to still fork out hundreds of trillions of dollars right now for Jenny Craig. Because didn't you hear? It's like really helps people get back into their skinny clothes.
Well, after talking to you, that's not my goal, to live a lovely life. And getting skinny is not the goal anymore. And I can't believe how much I tortured myself. But, like you said, that's what I believed in at the time. So.
And you've had to go through this, the whole cycle of it, to get to this point to where you're free from it. And now you're no longer sensitive to being sucked back in so much, right? You see it more clearly now, how that is just a waste. You've lived enough of that to see it clearly. A lot of the clients I work with who've been only dieting for a couple of years, they still have a hard time letting it go. Those clients who have been dieting for decades tend to, when all they need is humility. So those of you who've been dieting for decades and you're struggling, it's because you're lacking humility. The humility is the key in terms of shifting your paradigm, and the willingness to be inferior, right? And that was also, you've got to go into the willingness of inferiority and give it a ton of grace. And ultimately, that is huge in terms of recovering this quickly, right?
Yes. Yes. Go on, I'm sorry.
Well, I lost my train of thought.
Well,
so it happens to me too. See, I'm supposed to not have a loss of train of thought because I'm thin.
No, it's because since I've been doing it for decades, even if somebody has been doing it for decades, the change that happens overnight. I mean, I know you didn't suffer for as long. You were much younger when you
I did.
decided to.
Yeah, but this was my point. Thank you for reminding me. that when someone has gone in circles for decades, for nothing, for just getting worse and worse and worse, doing the same thing, and everything's getting worse, and that getting worse promotes continuing to do the same thing, ultimately, when you get to the bottom and you have to surrender for just to breathe, to survive any longer, it's almost like going, oh my God, what a freaking shit show. It's all a lie. It's all manipulative. None of it is real. It's all based on a fantasy. That fantasy doesn't even exist in reality. And even if someone paid me, I wouldn't want that fantasy because it's so self-centered and that's all you think about. I want the freedom to think about everything, not just my thinness.
Yes, right? Exactly.
So even if I was like, someone said, I'll pay you $100,000 to be thin. Do you really want it? Do you really want that? Really?
No. No, because I know what it takes to be thin. I mean, I know what it takes, not really so much to be thin, but
to want to be thin. The need to be thin. Yeah. That's what we're talking about. There are plenty of thin people out here who don't give a shit and don't have these issues.
Right.
What it takes to want to be thin. That's the problem, is wanting it. Wanting to be thinner than you are comes at a cost.
Trying. Like, oh, she's trying because she's, exercising, or she's trying because she's on a diet, or she's on this juice fast, or, and I would tell people so that they could see I was trying.
Mm-hmm. That's the illusion of, I'm not really this fat. I'm really not this fat. I'm actually thinner.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be that thinner person to prove this is who I am. I'm the thinner body, not the fatter body, because I'm identified by my body, right? Yeah, you have to get to where you're like, I don't care even if I'm in that fatter body. That isn't how I identify myself anyways.
No, right.
Because I don't identify physically.
But not before.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the problem, is if you identify with a thinner body, you always have to have an excuse for why you're fatter. You always have to have a reason, a sob story.
Yeah.
Poor me.
Yeah.
My thyroid is terrible, and my life is so terrible because I'm fat, because I have a thyroid problem. Yeah. You always have to have this weird excuse to feel better about it, which is still promoting thin supremacy.
And now it does really change overnight. Now I just feel better about it. Mm-hmm. I just feel better myself all around. When I look in the mirror, I don't look directly at my thighs.
And you are the largest you've ever been.
What?
And you are at the largest size you've ever been.
Yes, I am the largest size I've ever been.
And you don't care.
I don't care.
It's just not worth it, right? Even if you could lose...
I still was struggling with some things before I called you. I mean, even though I was eating to hunger, I still had issues. Which I still probably do have more issues.
I don't know. I think once someone really gets to the other side of this, and they, like you said, it's like, I don't know why. I could never go back. I could never go back. There's no amount of thinness and thin righteousness and thin fantasy that's worth that type of suffering. I'd rather not have a boyfriend. I'd rather be alone. I'd rather be single the rest of my life. I'd rather, right?
And, and be free instead of,
held captive and held hostage to this, I have to fix this first. You're 48 years old. Yeah. You've been saying this since you were 12. How much longer can you fix this first before you start living again? Because you've been on pause for a long time.
I know. I feel sad for that girl, but there's nothing I can do about it now except for live my life.
Well, and even then, you did what you thought was right. And it took a significant 36 years of effort to come to the realization that the fantasy they're selling is a lie. It doesn't exist. It could if you suffered.
Yeah.
You could suffer. But even then, you can't fight against that impulsivity.
Yeah, but there's also a goal with that, in mind. Now I don't have a goal in mind of how I'm supposed to be. I don't even think, I don't have anything in mind about how my body looks, how my face looks, anything. I just
it is what it is, and you accept it as good enough, because all you really need from the body is life. Versus, I mean, we had talked about this, that before what you needed from the body was so strict, overreaching. It was, you didn't even know what it was, but it was never good enough. Right?
Yeah.
And you never really appreciated or even loved the body you were in. It took excruciating pain and suffering and sacrifice for you to appreciate the body, and even then it still wasn't good enough. So it's like all of a sudden you realize that if you called upon your highest wisdom, if you called upon the wisdom that you have today and said, I get to start my life over with this current wisdom, would you in your next life with the next body do the same thing with it? Set a standard so high outside of its reality that you will never appreciate the body you're in. You spend your whole life, 36 years now, trying to fix it. As if it's the calling of your life to fix the body you're in. And ultimately you end up 210 pounds, right?
Yeah.
So in your next life, your highest wisdom would say, just accept the body you're in, even if it's judgeable. Why would you care anymore? Don't you want the freedom to live? Don't you want that freedom that you thought thinness would give you? Why can't you just give yourself the freedom by saying, I don't want to live through my body image. I don't want my life dependent on my attractivity. Right? For people to be attractive to me sexually, physically, I don't want that to be my calling. That comes with so much suffering. I'd rather just accept the body I'm in and live in a completely different space in my heart and soul, to where I don't need the body to be any certain way. Even if you're given the body that is the most beautiful, worship-worthy body, do you really want that to be how you identify your worth and your life's purpose? Hell no. Hell no. No wonder Marilyn Monroe killed herself. I get it. Right?
Yeah.
Hell no.
But I do feel more loving towards myself now. Like, not so much taking care of my body, but just, I feel like, are you thirsty? Oh. Yeah, I don't give it any other horrible thoughts anymore. Like,
you're more caretaking.
You should be drinking 2 quarts of water.
Yeah, you need to carry a jug of water around with you and make sure you hit those lines. You can do it. Force yourself to drink water even though your body's saying,
Yeah. And now it's more like, hello. That orange looks good? Okay, cool. Before, it would have been, I wonder how much sugar, should I just eat half the orange, blah, blah. I would judge it before I even started eating it.
I know.
And then be judging the whole time while I was eating it and didn't realize what I was doing to myself, I guess.
You didn't even enjoy
I would never do that in my next life. And I'm not going to do it for the rest of this life. This is and I would never do that to my body again.
You would just say it's a
like
lie.
Like you said, I have no business trying to manage it.
Right. So my point is. Go ahead.
I got a good model.
Right.
Even though they tell me it's obese and I could get.
You're gonna have diseases. You need to diet.
Yeah.
It's like dieting actually is a sure route to these issues. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So my point earlier too is like before your standards for the body were super freaking high, where now if you use that higher wisdom, your standards are, I just need to be alive. That's all I just need the body to be alive. If it's sustaining life, I don't need very much from it. It's alive and it's self-regulating, which is even more amazing.
Yes.
So all I have to do is just pay attention when it says, I'm uncomfortable, or I need to eat, or I gotta go pee, or I'm freezing cold.
And I've been ignoring that since 12 years old.
Yep, and focusing on how you can achieve the euphoric high of thin supremacy so that you can prove yourself to your dad, to your sisters, and to all men who want a pedophilic looking child to have sex with.
Yeah, exactly. That's before.
Yes.
Now I'm free to do what I want.
And now you'd be like, no, I just want my life. I want my life to be open from my mind. I want this to be open. I want this to be open. I want to breathe, and I want to have this whole huge landscape of possibility and change and evolution, and I want to adapt and move on, and I don't want to be defined by this didn't work or this does work. I don't want to focus on this anymore. What do you really need from your body to have that freedom? Life. Consciousness.
Nothing. I don't need anything for my body to have that freedom. I have it now.
Right? And now,
is that what you're talking about? I
yes.
feel like I'm missing something.
No, you got it. You're like, you don't need shit now.
I'm not hearing you well.
You don't.
I don't.
You don't. And don't you agree that awareness even diminishes that thin supremacy in terms of its relevance even more? Because you have access to all this freedom. Because you're no longer defining this freedom by thinness. Or thinner than I amness, right? You're just, I'm going to go out. I'm going to be vulnerable. I'm accepting judgment. I'm accepting people's whatever, because they're the ones that can suffer. I'm done suffering for in fear of them. So if they suffer because I'm overweight, is that really your responsibility?
No. But I used to think it was.
I know. That's the illusion. I
can't believe how,
I'm causing so much terrible life experiences when I go to the beach if I'm fat for other people. So I will not go to the beach to save them from suffering from their narcissistic, sociopathic, self-centered need to control of what everybody else is doing. Right.
But now I feel like I was the narcissistic one, thinking that people were even paying attention at the beach.
You're right. It's a mirror image of what you
to anybody's fat thighs at the beach. So it's pretty narcissistic of me to believe that people were paying attention to mine. I mean,
you're right. That you were the center of the beach, and everybody is appalled at what your body it looks like, and they all believe that you're just it's like a pariah, and it's just affecting everybody around you in a terribly and you're causing so much suffering because you're overweight to everybody around you. And in reality, at this point, if someone is actually feeling that way, they should remove themselves. You right?
From my presence?
Yes, that's what I meant. Like if someone thinks that your being overweight is that catastrophic, they should remove themselves.
Yes, they should. But in reality, yes, I do, which I think I'm able to see better now. I do have friends that are suffering and maybe think that I am giving up and just, because I've tried to tell a couple friends, and they do, say things like, well, don't you want to be thin and healthy or whatever? And I tell them I am. I'm fine. I am healthy. There's nothing wrong with me.
You don't even need to say that. You don't even need to defend yourself in any way, because I want you to think of it this way. Do they really know the amount of effort you've put into this and the degree of suffering that you've lived with for decades? I
don't think so.
So that's the only reason why they would encourage you to keep on doing it, because they don't know the suffering that's attached to it. So even if someone goes, don't you want to be thin and healthy? You can just say, I just need to take a break. You don't need to tell them everything. You could say, I dedicated 36 years of my life trying to fix this. I can't do it anymore. So thank you so much for caring. I know you care about me. And thank you. I appreciate it, because their desire for you to be thinner comes from the illusion that you're going to die. which is the truth anyways, right? But they
well,
think...
I can't laugh at that because I did feel like that before.
I know.
I was going to die.
See, this is where you have... That's why I said it. It's like that's the illusion, that's the fear that's been attached to having body fat since post-World War height and weight chart propaganda,
yes,
right?
okay.
From the insurance companies that were trying to get you to get insurance if you were above the height and weight standards, right? So, anyways, it's totally forgivable, and really it's a communication. It's a love language. Thin supremacy, ultimately, from friends is a love language, and you can just be like, oh, thanks, you know what, maybe some other time, I don't know, I'm just taking a break, and that's what's right for me. I'm trying to focus on other areas. I don't know. But you don't need to defend yourself. You don't need to explain and get their approval. You don't need their approval. This is the key. Just because they're ignorant, you just can inherently go, oh, they don't know how much I suffered with this. And so that's why they would continue to encourage you to do it. They knew the level of suffering that you experienced. They would never encourage you to continue. And all you have to say is, it was not good for me. And you can just say, I have an eating disorder. Sometimes that just scares the shit out of people enough to shut up. Oh.
I did used to think, and that helped me the other day when I told some ladies that at the doctor, and the doctor said, I'm glad you mentioned that to them because they get a little crazy at the beginning of the year every year. I guess she had mentioned to them that dieting causes eating. Anyway, I forgot where I was going with that, but
just like needing approval from your friends that are totally ignorant to your suffering. Yes. Friends or family or people who really care about you.
Yeah, because I never told them how much I was. I mean, it's not their fault.
No. No, and
I forgot where I was going with it.
They mean well, anyways. But yeah.
Yes. But I just can't do
it. And they also, the other thing, I'll make one more point and we can stop recording this. Our session's over. But the other thing is that they don't know how they could accept 210 pounds.
I do feel like that. I do feel like they look at me and think, how can she be that weight
and be okay with herself?
Be okay with it.
Yeah, that's what they're projecting is their limited level of ability onto you. They don't know how someone could adapt to it. They don't, because to them it's that defining. Being thin is that defining for them that they immediately assume that you can't handle it either. Even though you've been handling this for 36 years. Granted, you haven't been this weight for 36 years, but you've been up and down, up and down, up and down for decades.
Yeah.
Right? And you just...
Yes.
It just never gets... You never get thinner and thinner and thinner. You get better.
Saying that.
Yeah. It's like having pity.
Straight out and saying that.
Yeah, no, because they don't realize that they're just projecting their limited ability or their neediness for thinness. They're projecting their neediness for thinness. And their fear of being unhealthy, which is a limited understanding of what health is, anyways. Which is the body's ability to sustain life, which means you're healthy right now at 210 pounds. So it's an important thing to understand when someone pities you or feels you're giving up. It's because they're projecting their weak ability to adapt to your circumstance. Similar to someone who, ends up with, let's just use paraplegia. I'm a paraplegic. And someone's like, oh, so sorry for you. I feel so bad for you. Like the martyr projection onto you. That's because they don't think that this is adaptable. They're projecting their victim response to if it happened to them onto you. So it's really a reflection of their issues than it is yours.
But even though this is the fattest weight-wise I've ever been, the healthiest I've ever been now.
Well, now that you've relaxed.
Except for maybe when I was 10 years old, before I ever thought about my body or anything.
Right? Until you weren't aware that your life was going to be permanently defined by your sexual attractiveness, right? To men.
Those years were good years.
Right.
But since then, this is the fattest weight-wise I've ever been, or whatever you want to call it, and 210, and I am the healthiest I've ever been.
So what do you think will happen?
Feel great all the time. So what is health? Yeah.
Right? It's a perception. It's really relative to the body's ability to adapt to an environment and to changing environments, and it's clearly adapted just fine. And you're 48, so it's not like you're 22 in saying this. You're 48. You've had a significant amount of years under this type of chronic, insane, inflammatory stress. And so you're heavier than you've ever been because of that. But yet, once you recover from the psychological trauma, and the PTSD, and all of this stuff, you're healthier, even though your body's fatter, which goes against the statistic height and weight charts that say that you're a dangerous ticking time bomb, which is how they promoted insurance in the 1930s.
Yes.
Don't you need to be thin to be healthy? Well, whoa, you really need to come up to it's like almost a century later. No, that's not how it works. Anyways.
But even friends of mine notice that I'm happier and seem healthier, and they say things to me like, have you lost weight? You seem so happy.
Oh.
No, I haven't.
Because you can only be happy when you lose weight. You can only be confident. Yeah. See, this is where if you just live as you do, it is so healthy psychologically for the thin supremacist to see. Like, wow, there's so much strength in the ability to be in a body that we think sucks, right?
Mm-hmm.
To detach from it and not care.
No effort in that way.
It's effortless. Very, very, very effortless. And there's no pressure. And there's no feelings of, I have to fix this, which can be so suffocating. How many people listening to this feel suffocated by the pressure to fix the body? I mean, think of that feeling you had when you felt this, like, I have to lose 50 pounds, 60 pounds, 100 pounds. The amount of, it's just...
just thinking about that would make me feel like I have to go get a bunch of food right now, maybe hide some.
Just in case.
I live alone, but I would have to be able to, have a stash because I know that, it's really unsustainable. I mean, I wouldn't be thinking this out loud to myself, but I would know that I wouldn't be able to restrict for a long, long time because I've been doing this for years, and I know I can only last a couple weeks.
So, exactly. So it becomes so overwhelming and claustrophobic, and it becomes very, very anxiety-ridden, and you can have nightmares over the panic, and the feasting makes it worse.
That's how I was feeling before.
And you're just stuck in this dark, dark, dark place as a binge eater, and it's hard to get your mind out of it because it's not negotiable for binge eaters to not lose weight. That's the one thing they don't think is negotiable, but as soon as you get rid of that and you negotiate, you don't have to lose weight. What happens to the binge eating?
It immediately stops because there's food around and you don't have to hurry up and eat it.
You got it.
Because there's never ever gonna be a time where I'm gonna restrict food, so I don't worry about that anymore.
And what it takes to let go and to forgive your body and to forgive yourself for getting to this place physically, ultimately is what it takes to recover, which is grace, humility, the humility to accept it, the humility in an environment where people shame and treat you like you're a pariah, the humility that takes to accept it and move on with your life. That's what it takes.
Oh. Okay, then can I ask you one more question before we go?
Yes.
So, when I was saying, okay, I'm accepting my body, and now I have all these good feelings about my body. When I see myself in the mirror, I think, and those positive thoughts just came naturally. I didn't have to say any more.
There's no mantras.
Like
there were no stickers on your mirror. That is all forcing. That's equating to the shame. That's a sign of shame.
Right,
when I see that on.
Right. But, so my question is, but I also, when I heard you talking that you were telling people just to go into that fatness and just be, go into a 300-pound body or whatever.
Permanently.
It's relative to where you are. But, so I said that to myself. So now, is that strange to, like, have the freedom on the other end? I know you're not promoting obesity, but is it, I do feel like free in a way because I told myself that, there was no going back after getting rid of the clothes. There's nothing to go back to. This is how I am. I'm in this moment.
Mm-hmm.
But I also gave myself freedom to gain more weight if
step 3.
my body needed to gain.
Yeah, that you're willing.
The opposite.
You're willing to gain. You're willing to gain. We're not saying you're going to love and admire gain.
Right.
We're saying you're willing to gain.
So I'm not just doing a wide pendulum swing from one way to the other.
Yes.
Because I haven't made any, I just said it's okay to gain. I haven't, started, ramping up the eating, trying to gain or anything.
Correct. You just hit the nail on the head. That's what some people think. Like, you're saying I have to love being fat. No, that means that you're getting ego off of it. That means you're attaching it and saying, I'm fat. That's duality, separating yourself from thinness. And now you have to work at staying fat because I'm good with my fatness and I'm going to prove it by shoving food in my face and saying, I love that I'm fat. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you just don't care. It's effortless. You're willing to gain, but you don't necessarily identify any direction anymore. That is the same as willingness to lose, and you will never use that as a tool to be seen as valuable in any circumstance.
Okay, yeah.
Even if you could.
So I was getting it. Okay.
Correct. I could have easily used my body on the front of my first book.
You could have easily used your body on the front of your first book?
Yes.
My body, that's my body. I thought it was me when I first saw the book.
No, but I could have changed that and made a lot more money.
Yeah, because everybody would have been like, yeah, I want to see how I can get
she looks at that eating to the hunger scale. Oh my God. Yeah. I don't.
Yeah.
No, would never. I don't want to promote that. I don't want to be associated with that, nor do I want my value to be based on the way you think I look. Which is why I'm not wearing any makeup right now. It's actually laziness. I just don't care. But you're right. So it's not just accepting that you could get fatter, because that's the risk of never dieting again. Never dieting. And ultimately the goal is that you eat the way you truly want to. And do you really want to binge? I have never met a binge eater who wanted a life of binging. They love it so much. They hate it. They'll do anything to recover. It's terrible. Physically, psychologically, emotionally, socially, you're embarrassed because you can't stop eating publicly. And the other thing is the shame after the fact and the physical pain that you're in. On top of this pressure to fix what you've just done and to restrict again because it was so terrible. I mean, I've never met a binge eater who really would love to promote binge eating as a way of life, ever. So when you look at this, I'm not promoting that in any way. I'm just suggesting that if you eat the way you truly want to eat in a way that is absolutely balanced within what's realistic for you, you got to be willing to be okay with what happens to the body.
Okay.
So the willingness for you to get total freedom from all that crazy trained micromanagement obsessive compulsiveness, which you didn't even see it that way because it's dieting and that's healthy. You have to be willing to, when you surrender all of this, to have that abundance of food that includes no limit to the quantity of food you're eating freely, right? You have to accept that, well, what if my body gets bigger? Because in order for me just to maintain, it requires that you restrict. So if it requires restriction just to maintain, you're going to gain weight, right?
Right.
So that's why you have to be willing to gain. If you're willing to gain to access the freedom, if that's the cost of the freedom, are you willing? Right? And it's not a temporary, I'll gain but fix it later. No. If I have to fix it later, I'm suffering
like that anymore. It doesn't feel like I'm going to fix something later.
Yes, well,
I don't ever feel like that anymore.
Well, and that was, don't you agree?
I just feel like if I do gain weight, then I guess my body needed to gain weight for whatever,
and because you're aware you're not trying to gorge yourself. You don't intend to overconsume. You're just wanting to relax around food and eat a variety. You don't want to be left with such scarcity. So you're eating like a quote-unquote normal person. If your body gains from that, you have to be willing to say, I'm okay with it, to recover, right? And so that part, but ultimately, if you really are no longer wanting to be valued or devalued based on the body, you have to be okay with all of it. Thin, fat, somewhere in between, gaining at one time, losing it again, and not even care, and not be like, I'm not going to manage it. So even if you lose weight, so this is the step why we haven't gone to yet in our conversations, which is, what are you going to do if you've lost 10 pounds? What would you do? Part of you wants to go, oh, euphoria! But do you really want that euphoria?
No, I don't think, no, I don't feel like I would have euphoria.
Okay, why? I want to know if you know why.
If I wasn't doing anything different, and I just suddenly lost 10 pounds, I'm big enough where I wouldn't notice 10 pounds.
Okay, 20.
Such an amount of weight, I might go to the doctor to make sure I was
20 to 30 pounds. And you're just doing what you're doing, blind to the body, blind, mentally to the food.
And I felt okay. And I felt okay physically. Yeah. I'd probably be okay with it.
Would you want to notice?
Pardon me?
Would you want to notice?
Would I want to be noticed?
Would you want to notice in your mind? Would you want to capture a thought about it in your mind?
No, I feel like that would send me into suffering.
You got it. Because that absolutely would send you into suffering. God, you really came to me in misery. I'm telling you, the people that I work with who are the most miserable and who've been miserable longest tend to recover the fastest, I'm telling you.
Oh, well, I believe that could be true. I thought you must have been a wise one when you recovered still in college.
It was just that bad. It was just that bad. It was just that bad. I mean, it takes a lot for someone to want to commit suicide. Seriously.
I can see that how people that have suffered the longest it's either be done or be dead. I just can't be. I mean, the amount of crazy that goes along with this is truly worse than anything.
Right. So it's just, I would agree.
It's worse than having fat thighs, believe me.
Oh, I know. I would much rather. I would surrender thinness.
And that used to be like a huge problem in my mind, Robin, and now it's like the least of my problem.
Mm-hmm.
I have all these things I want to do,
I know, it went from this big boulder that was pinning you to the earth, and you couldn't see around it, and it was suffocating you on your chest, and killing you, to this tiny little rock that's right over there.
Yeah.
And it's just like some little tiny pebble. Yeah. It's a pebble. No big deal.
And I have all these places I would want to go, and all these things I'm learning, and all this stuff I want to do, and yeah, I'm never going to run a marathon, but I never wanted to run one in the first place. But even my new body self doesn't want to run a marathon.
Yeah, but maybe in your previous life you would have said, maybe that's what I need to do to be thinner, is if I start training for marathons.
Oh, there was a time I was thinking about it. Oprah run many years ago was running something. Or something.
Oh my God, that poor woman.
Like, yeah, I should do that.
Yeah, I feel bad for
God,
Oprah.
I can't believe how much stuff I used to. I just feel like I'm so glad I came upon you. I just am so grateful for you because I just feel like um I I've been suffering for a long time and almost to the point. Well, not almost to the point where I didn't really think it was that strange.
Yeah, you're just fitting into everybody else that's on the same crazy train, not realizing that this isn't normal. This isn't how you're supposed to live. This isn't what your life's meant to be focused on at all.
Like fixing your body all the time.
Yeah, and we're not even capable.
Yeah,
like the body has thousands of years of evolution going into your genetics and DNA that you have no freaking control over. Why not just accept what it is and take your mind and open it up to the infinite space of all possibility? All possibility.
Awesome.
Right? Isn't that just magnificent? Where it's like, I could be paraplegic and it's all infinitely possible in a different way. I don't have to use my legs. I could be 210 pounds at 48 and single, right? And I'm going to put myself on a dating site. And I don't care if I'm rejected. Because what's the risk?
Right?
You have none.
Yeah, I can't believe I can't believe all this happening just because
you looked at a life of fatness.
Strange thing.
You looked the direction you've been running from. You've been closed off to the body you have. And what I did is went into look at the body you have, but make it worse. If that's the cost for you to get freedom, would you take it? It just takes the moment you open your eyes, your mind, and your heart to that possibility as if it's permanent. Something changes, doesn't it? Something's brain wiring changes. There's something that just goes, and it changes how you feel. This was the miraculous change that I had. It was this crazy freedom of, oh my God, it was like being shown the picture. It's like before I was living life looking through this tiny little straw of thinness. And everything had to fit in that tiny little straw of thinness. Enough that it was worthy of suicide. And all of a sudden, someone turned the sun on. And it was like, infinite space of possibility in a lifetime. Why stay on a track that goes in circles? You have your whole lifetime, trial and error, to try something new, to do something else. Why sit in a tiny circle that you've been going around in since you were 12 any longer? When you know it goes nowhere, it gets down, it goes down, and it's terrible. And you're miserable for a fantasy illusion of something that doesn't exist. You have infinite ways of being. Infinite ways of being.
I don't know how I did it for so long.
Because you wanted it enough. It's actually the miracle of survival mechanisms. When you really step out and go, holy shit, that's amazing. That's amazing. Loads of obsessive, compulsive, crazy work that was like incredibly powerful. You shouldn't have to do that just to be neutral. Just to feel neutral, and you never really feel good. You have to do all this work for this.
But did you immediately feel, when you decided to accept this body, when you went into this other person's body and you did that, and you came back and maybe I cried for a little while, and
yes, I grieved. There was a sadness.
Like 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. Did you immediately feel calmer? And like I rested well that first night, and
it was like it was like the aftermath of war that had been lost. The humility, the quiet, It felt like a storm, like a terribly catastrophic storm had just passed over. And it was just somber.
That makes sense.
It felt really somber, and it felt really like sad. Like it was, and it was. What I went through was really sad. It's terrible. You went through it for 36 years, maybe on a lesser, in the spectrum of the suffering, maybe it wasn't like the same intensity, but it was still an intensity of suffering that you lived through for 36 years. I couldn't have done it another second. It was just so sad. And it was sad how I got there, especially since I knew that the essence of me was so beautiful.
Yeah.
You got me crying over here. I just knew it was
sorry
like...
you're crying, but I feel the same. I feel like I've been torturing this kid that grew up crying. I've been torturing my own self, and I am and was always this beautiful soul that I don't know why I decided to torture it.
For just because the body didn't fit some weird fantasy. And it just was so, it was an incredible born-again reincarnation I went through. It was like, I am starting over. I have infinite life, and I did this part of it this way, and it was terrible. I don't have to keep on doing that. But to break free from that, I have to go into what I'm afraid of, which is being fat. Because if I leave this bubble, I'm going into this infinite space of possibility. And if I'm not willing to be fat, I'm not going to leave this bubble. And in the bubble is a gun that's going to go into my brain because I can't do it anymore. So the willingness to go the direction you're afraid of gets you out into this infinite space of possibility. And you realize when you leave it, like, oh my God, that was a joke. I thought it was real, right?
I did think it was real.
I know.
What you were asking is quite scary to someone
in the bubble,
trying to fight against being fat.
In the bubble.
You're asking them to
leave into wilderness.
But once you go through it, then you're like, oh, that wasn't.
I know. It's like
going through it wasn't that bad, but looking back on all the suffering that you caused yourself, you're like, wow, that was really harsh.
Mm-hmm.
That was really bad.
And that to me was sad. So sad. And the willingness to go into the wilderness, which is what it felt like to my primal mechanisms too. It was like very primal wilderness, open space of infinite possibility. But what gave me the grounding, because I didn't even know what to do or how to do it, but what grounded me was I know I have a good heart, and whatever happens in this life as it unfolds in front of me, I will use my heart, and I will use this calling of good to navigate my choices, to navigate what I say and communicate, do the best I can. And I'm going to forgive myself for sucking because I really don't know what I'm doing, but I do know that I have a good intentioned heart. My heart is full of good integrity, and that's all I really need. And if I'm judged and shamed, that's fine. I'm never willing to be someone else's slave again. I'm not going to do that again. So even if my parents reject me, even if my siblings think that I'm the biggest failure, but you know what? What if I am a failure? Well, I'm okay with that, because if that's the truth, I have to be okay with that. And I'm not going to feel bad about it, because my life is worth exploring. And I want infinite possibilities to figure this by trial and error. Why cut my life short at 20, 21, when I have potentially 60 to 80 years of trying it different ways? Well, I will try living this way. I'm going to try living that way. And I've just been living the same way ever since, in a very organic, flowing, way. I never set out to write a book. I never set out to do this. This was not in my mind as a goal to help people with this. It just happened. When I started helping people with HCG, this was not in the game plan.
No, I saw some of your earlier videos when you thought it was a good platform for people and stuff, but the way you're helping people now, it blows my mind because it's almost like sometimes you have to not, I don't know if it's like relive it, but you know, you get very intimate with all of us and talk about your personal journey, and I think that can be really strenuous. So thank you for all that you do.
It's my pleasure.
Because I do feel
I connect with the suffering.
Now, and I don't like think about it all the time. I don't think about, I guess, dieting and restrict. I just don't think about any of that all the time. I have all these other things that have just recently opened up to me. Because I have all these other things I want to do and the places I want to go just because of talking to you. So I really do appreciate you, but I can see how that would be stressful because I don't know if I'd want to keep thinking about my suffering all the time.
Well, to me, the suffering is that little tiny pebble. It's there. I remember it. I recall it very clearly. Okay. Right? I'm not a victim to it. Remember our first conversation where I was like, no, you got to flip this sucker around. You got to go into you have to forgive everything. That means you have to have compassion for the sexual assault, the molestation, the rape, the mind control. You have to have compassion and grace for all of that to recover. Right? You diminish it. You have to diminish that. Right? That's the goal, is to diminish it. Otherwise, it becomes magnified as if it's defining. And ultimately, for me, talking about this it's not hard for me. That's not hard for me.
Good.
But I appreciate that you.
Yeah. Because you are helping all people. Because I watch your videos. I'm not the only one on there.
Yeah, it just takes humility. That's probably the most important thing. If anybody gets anything out of these conversations, it's the willingness to fail. The willingness to say, I failed. I failed in supremacy, and I'm okay with that. And I'm forgivable. And it's forgivable. Even if someone else doesn't forgive me.
Lovely.
For my freedom. Robin. You're welcome. Thank you for letting me share this.